Hi. Welcome to Always Growing. I'm Heidi.
I'm Dave.
And in Always Growing, we talk about growing our marriages one step at a time each day. And so today we're talking about physical touch, which is always everyone's favorite, YouTube video conversation. But I think it's one of those things, like in the Christian church in particular, in Christianity, we shy away from talking about this. And I think that is a way that the kind of world has impinged on our freedom to enjoy touch in our marriage, to connect in touch, in friendship even in certain ways. It's a different intimacy than marriage, but physical touch, what are some of the purposes you think, Dave, of physical touch, and also the benefits, I guess, of physical touch in marriage and relationship?
Yeah. I think maybe you would be happy to hear this, that I think a lot about the connection between, and just kind of more about affection than it is about sexual, in that way, because obviously it does lead to that in terms of there's a kind of a beginning, getting the cycle going, for that, but better than that, I think, is just the idea of having affection, because it's kind of cheap for a husband to be oh, I'm going to show this affection so that
so
it leads to more. Although there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, but it's also kind of well, yeah, but what if you just did it?
Yeah.
And there's a sense of a connection there, affection, and so.
I think that's huge. Also, when you said that, one thing that came to mind for me is, again, having a broad idea of physical touch in marriage. I think that so often we get so inundated with images and stuff of sexuality in our culture and media and things like that, that is the representation of physical connection for us. And it's sexuality is so good that God created this, and he's so creative and clever that he bonds us through sexual activity with our spouse. That's why sexual activity outside of marriage is so dangerous. It's because there's actual chemicals and hormones and endorphins that do all this neurological
in our brain
work.
And in our bodies and stuff.
Yeah, and good job, God. That's just really amazing to me. It also feels good. I think that there is no problem with one of or both of the spouses being I'd like this to go somewhere. I'd like this to go somewhere. That's a good thing. But you're right. One thing with all those images coming at us is we feel like there's something wrong with us. Always, because we're not connecting in the same way, or we're not that excited about it at times because we have people to run around to sports activities, and we have jobs, and we're tired, and we have to just make dinner.
I feel like there's nothing cooler than seeing a super old couple that are holding hands. It's
oh right,
it's
a good representation.
The cutest thing ever. And I shouldn't say cute coming from a manly perspective, but
okay, don't
I can't do that. Sorry. I know you feel like that. That's the man code or whatever.
I don't believe in that.
It's a real thing. But we shouldn't follow it.
Okay. Off track.
Sidetracking.
But yeah,
there is sorry, I kind of interrupted your thought too.
No, that there's connections in other ways. And I also think our media would be horrified by the idea that old people have sex in their marriages, and I think that's so rude. They have every right and every goodness from God in sharing in any part of that. The thing is, I do think love comes in stages and phases, and it goes back in on itself. Again, I know I keep bringing up Song of Songs, but that's one thing we see in there is this passion that turns into companionship, that comes back to passion and companionship. There's all of these different seasons of love, and that's good and okay, and that's going to look different in your marriage than in our marriage. But physical touch is important, however that looks.
Yeah. And I really think there are certain times when the physical touch is purely for like comforting the other person, like if they're crying, you know, and or if they like, I don't know, they feel like you need that companionship of just holding hands or something. There's certain moments where you're responding to not necessarily like a sad thing either. I mean, it can be like, you can be like rejoicing, like we you know, just had a celebration, like our baby was born and now let's hug each other, like, you know what I mean, like
right. It is true that physical touch works with all different moments.
It's a response to lots of different emotions and lots of different times.
You're right about the connectedness, like because it's about connectedness at its core, physical touch, like it is appropriate in all different emotions, and it's going to take different spaces and places. And I do think sex uniquely brings a couple together in connection, and that's one reason I think that couples do have sex when they're sad and when they're happy and when they're exhausted and when they are energetic, and like there's different reasons you have sex too. And I think one thing that can happen in marriages is we get trapped into thinking it's just about passion. It's just about like sexual excitement. And sometimes sex is really about that connectedness in different places and spaces. And I know that sounds a little bit of a girly vantage point. I feel like there's this cultural idea that like men are in sex for the like physical enjoyment of it and women are there for the connectedness. And I think we're both there for everything. Like,
yeah.
You know, like,
yeah, right.
And like you said, there's so much more to be had in that. So I wanted to share the scripture. Did you have another thought before I share that, or are you?
No.
Okay, awesome. Just wanted to, didn't want to cut you off. Okay, Matthew 19:13 through 15 is where actually Jesus lets the little children come to him. And so it says, then children were brought to him that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples rebuked the people, but Jesus said, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. And he laid his hands on them and went away. And this passage is obviously not directly about marriage, but about Jesus' relationship with people. And so I think if the God of the universe desires to touch us, there is a reason that touch is so profound and powerful in our marriages. And so I really think that application is important for us to take away, that touch does something to express acceptance and community and love and care to someone.
Yeah.
And so we can give that to each other.
Yeah, I think, you know, children are on a very the very basic level of just like connection with people. So like if, you know, Jesus communicating to them by laying his hands on them or caring for them in that way is kind of like saying like, I can't explain like theologically to these little kids like these big ideas about, you know, these big theological ideas, which is one of the reasons why the, you know, disciples were like, why are you messing around? This is
not big theology.
Yes, no, like too insignificant. And like Jesus like, no. And his way of communicating with them is, you know, physical touch, and that is like really powerful for them because that's one of the few ways that they can get the real, you know, what do you call that? Just affection, or not affection.
Acceptance and warmth.
Yeah,
and
all those things, like communicating. It's
like
one way they can
value.
get it communicated to them is in that fashion.
Ooh, that's good.
And I think, and also like in our marriages too, because, and sometimes in our friendships and other relationships too, it's like, there's no words for this moment right now. Like I can't say something that's going to make this better. I can't say
it.
Yeah, I can't say something to explain the joy that I'm feeling right now, or that you're both feeling simultaneously. Like there's no words for that. And so the only thing left to communicate is that physical touch.
I think that's good.
And it's kind of like that passage about like when you're praying in the Spirit and when you don't have the words to say to God, but like the Spirit is communicating that to God of what is on your heart.
That's really good. Well, and our last question that we want to leave you with is, what does physical touch look like in your marriage, and what would you like that to look like? You know, I think especially in marriage, life comes in and we just don't have these conversations. And the research shows that people who are most satisfied with their sex life and their marriages in general are people who talk about stuff. Not necessarily even are doing all the stuff, but they're talking about it and they're talking about what they need. And so we encourage you to talk about what you'd like for physical touch and what you are also capable of. So being aware that we all have different capacities for physical touch and expressing things in physical touch. Some people have had traumatic incidents, and so understanding that there might be a barrier to connecting in the way that we're talking about. And so I highly recommend therapy. There is help and hope for those kind of things if you'd like to connect deeper in a different way and kind of remove some of those barriers. Also, there is healing in safe relationships too, and attaching to one another in a marriage. And that's one reason with people who have had a sexual past that kind of haunts them, if you will, whether that's something that they have been a part of themselves or someone else brought on them. There is healing in therapy. There's also healing in safe relationships and with Jesus and his kindness and compassion and forgiveness for things that are our fault and things that are other people's fault. And so I really encourage you to dive into that. Knowing each other's personal space, I think, is just as an important aspect of touch as it is being connected and touching and stuff. So I think that some of us have a wider bubble than other people.
Yeah, that's true.
And when we listen to each other about that,
everybody's different in their, you know, how they, I don't know, how they experience that and how they, you know, some people are very much not into physical touch very much, you know, and that's okay. You know, you can communicate other ways, and maybe you just prefer like a hand on the shoulder. That's it. Like, don't go any farther.
Right, yeah.
And I mean, that could be really healthy too. Like maybe just that one thing that you can find that you really communicates that. And
for
then
you
can have that.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, so just talking about that in your own marriage and what does that look like is a really powerful thing we encourage you to do. If you have questions, you can private message us, and we're happy to help. We are, you know, maybe not the experts on your marriage. You are, but I think that God gives us other people, and there's probably other people in your life, therapists, pastors, friends, mentors that can also help answer questions about what, you know, you're dealing with or trying to figure out for your own marriage. All right. We'll see you next time.
See ya.